call the meeting to order. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call, please.
Mrs. Bloom. Here. Ms. Lehman.
Here.
Ms. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Nally.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Here. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our regular meeting held January 8th, 2024, please?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Lewis. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Nally. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Nally.
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom. Yes. Ms. Lehman.
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes, motion's approved. Moving on, any legislative report tonight?
Just wanted to mention we've received some couple of pieces of information regarding the Fair School Funding Plan Incorporated. And I guess what I'd like to do is ask Mr. Detweiler to send these two pieces of information out to the board so we can talk about it a little bit during the legislative liaison comments at our next meeting. And then if we want to go further with it in terms of they've provided a draft resolution to support. And yeah, I think once you get into that, then you're also talking money where they, want some money so that they can continue their cause. But I think it'd be good to just bring it up at the next meeting, have some discussion, and then the following meeting, if we choose, to put it on the agenda. That's all I had.
All right. No walk-on items tonight?
No, sir.
Moving on to community, hearing of the public. If anyone would like to address the board, there's no one here, so we'll go ahead and skip that over. Moving on to superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Price. I'd like to introduce from the Ohio School Board Association, Ms. Terry Morgan. Terry's helped us. She's probably been 10 years, maybe you've been around? 8 years. Terry's helped us in just so many ways with trainings and searches and just a lot of things, Ohio School Board Association. So it's a familiar face for a couple of us, and we're really glad to have her here. We had talked about, remember in October, I think, the previous board had said, you know what? Nothing like a good refresher with a new board, building new culture, kind of building a new team here. Let's have Ohio School Board Association come and give us just a nice update and training on roles and responsibilities. And I'm going to stop talking. Terry, thank you so much for coming and driving up in the cold. We'll get you home before it gets icy, I promise.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I have served on 4 different school boards. For those of you that don't know me, I started in the mid-90s on the Olentangy School Board and then did the Delaware Area Career Center, the ESC of Delaware Union Counties, which at the time I was president, merged with Franklin County ESC to become the ESC of Central Ohio. So I was on school boards from the mid-90s till 2010. So thank you for your service. I know what you're going through, and hopefully that can add a little bit of credibility to what I'm talking about tonight as far as best practices. I'm sorry you're going to kind of see the screen this way, but I do have the slides in front of you if you want to follow along on paper. This is your time, so please stop me, ask questions, let's have conversation. I want to make it pertinent to Fremont, so anything that comes, interrupt. So some of the things that we're going to cover tonight are the roles and responsibilities, governance, team leadership, meeting management, and communication. Governance we describe as that 30,000-foot level, so that you are making decisions, guiding the district, and then leaving the day-to-day work to your superintendent and treasurer and their staff. Certainly you have to be worried about policies and holding people accountable, that especially the 2 employees that report to the board. So by law, my clicker is just not like this. By law, you are doing employing superintendent and treasurer and evaluating both, approving the annual budget, making sure you have safe and needed facilities. And I think that certainly became an interesting proposition when we had COVID, right? Were you on remote longer than that couple of months? Or
Mostly just that, and we did a split, blended, and
good.
Yeah.
Good. And then certainly the finances. But there's practical responsibilities. And certainly one of those is considering approving or not recommending any recommendations that would come from your superintendent and or your treasurer. And the reality is you need all of the information, right? You need the good, the bad, and the ugly to make sure that you can make those good decisions. But ultimately, you want a recommendation on what the superintendent or the treasurer feels like is the best way to go. So having that level of trust where you feel like you're getting all the information you need, and then you know that whatever the assignment or the decision will be carried out. Some boards get from the community that they're rubber stamping, right? Because it's 5-0, 5-0. But the reality is, if you're doing your homework, you're getting all the information that you should get, you're coming to the same conclusion, it's not rubber stamping. It's just that you've done your homework outside the meeting. So one of the things that we found, and it's really become very true since COVID, is you need to take time to state why you are making the decision you're making. To not get so rote. You know, a motion, second, vote. Motion, second, vote. It's very important for the president to call for a discussion and for you to say, you know, I called the superintendent. I had 3 questions. I got my questions answered. I'm ready to support this. Something that shows you did your homework, that you're thoughtful about your decision. Not to make your meetings go till midnight, but to make sure that people realize it's a little transparency, right? There is reasons behind the decisions you're making. Setting goals and objectives and being accountable to them is certainly important. And we'll talk a little bit later about a strategic plan. Informing and weighing the public opinion. That's one of the important things, that your role is that conduit between the community and your administrative team. But the responsibility also lies with you to not be giving the answer, right? That you are listening. And then you're asking, did you follow that chain of command? Have you talked to the teacher? Have you talked to the principal? And the other side of that is, I think it's your responsibility to let the superintendent know what you've heard, what someone asked you, what someone's concerned about. So again, you place him in a position to be prepared when it does ultimately reach his level. I know that's hard. I can remember the first time I had a parent say, you know, the 3rd grade teacher is being so mean to my child, and I just don't know what to do. And I said, well, have you talked to the teacher? And she's like, well, no, because I don't want to make it worse, right? I don't want her to be mad at me for, you know, complaining. But the reality is that's where the conversation needs to start. It needs to happen with the parent, the teacher, and even the child maybe sometimes. And perhaps that needs a mediator to be there during that conversation. But it's not yours to solve. It's yours to help guide to the next step or to the right person. And policies. Are you Neola or OSBA?
OSBA.
OSBA. The reality is, in today's world, it is so complicated. If they sneeze at the State House, it changes like 6 of your policies, right? So just having a third-party facilitator is so important. And it doesn't even matter who you use as long as you're using someone to keep you up to date on policies. Then perhaps the most important is that mission and vision. And we say your mission is what you do every day. Your vision is where you'd like Fremont City Schools to get to, what you aspire to. So certainly making sure those are well-defined and holding people accountable for those. Governance versus process. We use the word governance to explain what we feel is that 30,000 foot level, and process then is to get the work done, right? So again, we've talked about making sure that you have all the information that you need to make those good decisions, that you trust that the assignment, decision, whatever is going to get carried out, and that it's a two-way street. If John gets some kind of project, he's going to keep you informed on how it's going, and you're going to be able to call him and say, what about this? What about that? So that conversation is important. Respecting that chain of command we talked about, from parents and students to the board. Ultimately, what you'll find is people will come before the board because they didn't like the decision, right? John has ultimately made a decision, and somehow they think the board can change that. One of the things that can really solidify your relationship between administrative team and board is having the trust that John knows that you're not going to change his decision without some kind of conversation ahead of time, and that he actually brings that to you before the parent or the community member would. Investment builds trust. Again, we talked to new board members. Just curious, Laura and Don, are you coming to Board Member 101?
Yes, I'm this weekend.
Oh, this weekend, so you're going to Cleveland or Columbus?
The Lewis Center.
Columbus.
Yeah, Columbus. Okay, good. How about you? Are you going
I'm
to?
not at this time.
Okay.
I had other.
Commitments.
going
Yeah,
on, but
it's a
I'm
big commitment. It's 2 days.
Yeah. So hopefully I can catch some other things during the year, and
If you find you have any time free up, the Saturday afternoon when the legal team talks is really important, because they talk a lot about parliamentary procedure and sunshine law and some of those things that are a little more technical, because a lawyer can tell you that they're true than I would say. So just FYI, because it is 2 weekends. The February 3rd and 4th, it's in Findlay.
right.
So
And
just
that's only 2 weekends that they're.
we just do it too. Well, we'll do one in the summer, kind of a shortened version on a Saturday in July. Okay. And Board Leadership Institute, which is in May 3rd and 4th, is another opportunity that you could have some learning and professional development too.
Are any of those like teaching opportunities available online?
We do put a lot on our webinars, and it's a whole page on our website of different webinars that we've had already conducted that you can listen to for free. And then there's some that have like a minimal kind of cost that you watch. So yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know, is everybody on our board here, are we all familiar with, if we want to go to a seminar or one of those trainings, who we talk to and how we move forward with that? I know now.
Yeah.
It's going for the weekend.
Yep.
I learned quick.
So one of the things that we talk about at new board member workshop is the fact that there has to be acknowledgement and support for both the new people coming on and for the veterans, right? So new people coming on want to have some kind of onboarding before you get on the board, is bringing you up to speed, so that you don't come into the board meeting asking a million questions when you could have learned some of this ahead of time. And then veterans don't say, we already tried that, didn't work kind of conversation. We do have an onboarding checklist. If you want to have, I can send that to you.
Great.
That would be interesting, just to make sure that you cover all the things that would be helpful to you. Not that you're going to learn it all in a short amount of time, but you're at least exposed to some of it. I mean, I served all those years on school board, and school finance is still a mystery to me. I appreciate every treasurer in this state, I'll tell you, because that's just not my venue. And the one issue board member, oftentimes new board members come on with a personal agenda, and I know you won't believe that, but it is true. I have actually had new board members say, oh, I'm running because I want to fire the football coach, which seems to be the one popular theme. The one issue board member for me was the I worked for the county commissioners. I was communications director. And we as staff started talking about how there were so many times that it was a 2-to-1 vote, 2-to-1 vote. The one commissioner just always seemed to be one step off of what we were talking about. And when we started talking about it, we realized the reality was he only made decisions with data. He only wanted statistics. He didn't care if building a bridge was going to help, kids get to school on time. But if we could prove to him that building the bridge would save the school district money because they'd have less time for a school bus, it just had to be data. And once we started giving him that data and understanding the filter that he was using to make decisions, we started having 3-0 votes because it wasn't that he was against what we were doing. He just couldn't justify it in his mind unless he had data. So appreciating that each of you are 5 different individuals, that you come with different filters, but you also come with different talents. And so making sure that you use that time to get to know each other and appreciate those. We've talked about the chain of command, the importance of having that discussion. Again, your community and your different stakeholders need to know that there is more information that they don't always have access to, but that you are using to make good decisions. And that's important, again, if you can just have those 1 or 2 comments to show some conversation. And finally, it's not a public meeting. It's a meeting of your board in public. And that's extremely important because you have got to get the work done. This is the time, the only time that you are board members is when you're sitting in a meeting, in a public meeting. Now, we would never say that it's a good idea not to have public participation. That's the time that you want to hear and listen. But this is important, and I'm glad to see that you're kind of in that half moon shape so that you can look at each other, right? You can make eye contact. We have seen boards that sit in that straight line and they're leaning back to talk to somebody that's on their board when this is the conversation that needs to happen when you're making decisions. And it also is sending a visual, I think, when you're sitting in a straight line, it makes it seem like you really are there for the public, right? That you're sitting here so you can see us and you can talk to us, which is not the reality. This is how it should be. So building trust with your administrators, certainly having your superintendent as your CFO, your treasurer as your, CEO and your treasurer as your CFO is extremely important. Having that respect for them. And transitioning, if you have been a parent or volunteer, any of those things that you just freely walked into the building, right? You sign in and you go to wherever you want to go. As humble as you are, you now wear your board hat 24/7. Even though you're not in a board meeting, people will have an expectation because you are a board member. So just being thoughtful when you go into a building, if you want to see something that's going on to that building, arrange it ahead of time through your superintendent so that he doesn't get the panic phone call from the building principal saying, oh, there's a board member in the building. And it's not because they don't want you to be there. It's because they want to show off their best self, right? They want their kids to be doing the right thing. The teacher wants to be doing the right thing. So just having that ability to give him a heads up. And again, anything we're talking about tonight, I'm not telling you to change if it's working. But a lot of districts are sending, like the board member would send a text to John to say, hey, I'm going to a parent-teacher conference in the elementary. Just wanted you to know I'll be in the building tonight. I don't know. How do you feel about notification?
That'd be perfect. That way, give everybody heads up on the other end that they're coming, and we can have our best face. Not that we're trying to hide anything, but we do.
Exactly.
Like you said, we just want to spit shine a little bit if a board member's coming.
Absolutely. Sure. And even in a parent-teacher conference, I can't tell you the number of times I had twin boys and the number of times I'm sitting in a parent-teacher conference and all of a sudden we're talking about the teacher negotiations and I'm steering it back. No, I'm here as the mom. So again, it's just being thoughtful. It's not being He's not trying to control whether you go or not, and you're not trying to catch people. No surprises. Again, it is important in that conversation to make sure that your treasurer and your superintendent have a heads up about what questions you might have. So if you call them ahead and ask a question, say to John, you know what? That is such a good answer. I think the rest of the board should hear that as well as our community. So I'm going to ask you this question again during the board meeting so that you can give that same answer. Or you call them and say, hey, I'm going to ask these 3 questions. Can you just be prepared to answer them? Whatever that mutual respect that you don't want him to be unprepared. And it's okay to say, I don't know, and I'll find out. But if you can generate the conversation that you did the homework ahead of time and you thought about the question ahead of time, it is helpful.
One of my mentors always said, it's really a good thing you can get to a point where no one's surprising anybody, right?
Right.
It doesn't really good for anyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Supporting the will of the board. Certainly we do not say that it has to be 5-0 all the time at all. I mean, we want you to make thoughtful decisions and you have reasons for making those choices, but it's also the majority of the board is the final decision, right? So finding that way, because of course the person that's the outlier, that's who the media will go to or the community will go to and say, Tom, why did you vote that way? And they didn't. So having the words that feel comfortable for you to say, you know what, I didn't think the property at 5th and Main was the best choice because it has bad drainage, but the majority of the board voted to buy it, so we're moving forward. The city council where I live has 7 members, and they all got the same information about an income tax levy to put it on the ballot. 6 voted to put it on the ballot. 1 voted not to. She had reasons. She gave good testimony about why she didn't want to support it. And that was fine, except that she left the meeting and started the campaign against the income tax levy. And it never had a chance. It couldn't have passed because people said, what does she know that the other 6 don't know? Or why didn't they think that? You know, it just was too many questions. And it wasn't fair. I mean, she could still hold her belief that she didn't want it on the ballot, but it was not fair for her to start the campaign against the issue when she's a member of a team, right? So we'll talk a little bit about meetings, and I know some of this information might not be as new or as readily available to the 2 new board members, but the meeting is a prearranged discussion of the public business of a public body by a majority of the public body's members. It doesn't matter what you call your meeting. So let me back up. There's only 2 kinds of meetings, regular and special. And I'm sure Megan can coach you on all this. Regular means you set the date at your organizational meeting in January. Any other date that comes up, retreat, work session, whatever you want to call it, is a special, just because it wasn't on your original calendar. Do you have 1 or 2 meetings? 2. That is great. And do you often do some kind of work session with that?
You're actually a work session.
Good.
Congratulations.
Yay! Am I a regular or a special?
You're regular because we were on the calendar.
Oh, I want you to be special.
Oh, you are special. Meeting isn't. You are special.
Yes, of course, of course. So, thank you for doing 2 meetings a month because, first of all, you don't want meetings that go on for 5 and 6 hours, especially in the evening. We're all tired. Everybody gets to a wall that, you know, you're not making good decisions. And secondly, there's just way too much business these days to get done. And you don't have the opportunity for conversation. Just like your interest in hearing more about the fair school funding, you don't have time for that sometimes in an agenda where you have to be approve this, approve that, do this, do that kind of thing. So having a work session or a second board meeting where you can have a little more time and conversation is a great thing. So kudos for that. The other thing is that, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead to the next slide. The email has now become a definitive type of means of a meeting. For a long time, the area was gray, right? If you sent a text or an email, yeah, it's public record. But if it had more than 2 or 3 members, was it really a meeting? Well, that happened at Olentangy. Thanks to Olentangy, we now know. And I wasn't on the board. I was still involved with the school district, but Adam King, well-meaning board member, right? And that's it. Most board members have good hearts, just make some bad decisions sometimes. And he decided that 2 athletic coaches were using vans inappropriately. So he went out, did his own investigation, and came back and said, at a board meeting, didn't tell anybody ahead of time, publicly at a board meeting, named them and said what they were doing wrong. So first of all, he got sued for slander. But secondly, the other 4 board members were caught so off guard, let alone the superintendent. So because Columbus media usually is at the Olentangy meetings, they decided they needed to write a letter to the editor to explain, we didn't know anything about this. We're going to do a good investigation. We've hired a law firm, all those kind of things. Problem was they started writing the letter to the editor by email. It's attached a draft, sent it to the other 4, said, what do you think? Do you want this sentence? Do you want to add something? And of course, Adam found out. So Adam took them to Common Pleas Court for violation of sunshine, having a meeting by email. And Olentangy lost. They went to 5th District Court of Appeals. Olentangy lost. Went to Supreme Court, and Olentangy lost. And the Supreme Court finally came out with this language that says, nothing in the plain language of the revised code expressly mandates that a meeting occur face-to-face. To the contrary, it provides that any prearranged discussion can qualify as a meeting. So email is good. Never use reply all, right? Email can be very informational. Superintendent can send out a weekly Friday report. I assume you do something like that. Can go to all of you. But if you have a question or a comment, you're going to reply directly to John. You're not going to hit reply all. If you see something in an email that Lori sent out and you want to ask her about it, you call or you email just Lori. So making sure that that one-on-one conversation can happen, but doesn't include the other board members, will keep you safe. Agendas, certainly the revised code it says nothing about agendas, but we would say that's not a best practice. You never want to have a meeting without an agenda. And the reality is the agenda can't be set by board members, right? It is the board's agenda, but you've got to have John, Megan, and their staff putting that agenda together. Are you using board docs now for your agendas?
No, we're not.
You get a discount if you do.
Do you? Okay.
Yes. So FYI, since you're a policy client.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about how your draft agenda gets put together.
It really generates through my directors. So I have 5 directors in each department, and they really bring the vast majority of the things onto the agenda as business occurs in their departments. So.
And then do you meet with president?
No, we don't.
Okay.
No, we have
And
not.
again, that's fine.
Yep.
And that says a lot about you as a board and that trust level too, right? That you know you have an opportunity if you want to have input on the agenda, but you also know that it's going to get put together and have everything you need. Do you send it to or can the board get on to board docs? Oh, no, you don't. Do you send it to the agenda?
We send the draft before the meeting, that they can
before it gets published?
Correct.
Good. So they have an opportunity to say, yeah, that's not ready, take it off, put it on.
Every Friday.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, Friday, like last Friday, we got this agenda.
Okay.
So we have time to look at it.
Great. Everybody's feeling comfortable with that. We have some people out in the community across the state that are questioning some things about boards. And one of them is, is it really the board's agenda? Well, it is, because this is the business that you need to deal with, but you're not in education in the school district of Fremont. You're not going to know what needs to be put on there. So
One thing we struggle with too, and I know these guys are very good about it, but sometimes things come up late too.
Sure.
So sometimes you put out an early draft, it isn't so far off what we're going to have eventually. So it's always that balance act between having an accurate agenda
Right.
versus an easy agenda.
Yes.
Yeah, not easy to
And
do
I
both.
think, you have to appreciate that he is trying to get the information as quickly as he can to get it on the agenda. But there's timing issues a lot. And something can't wait. It's got to go on. So I think that's perfectly fine. I like, again, how you're seated. I like that you're doing the pledge. One of the things that we find is really extremely helpful is having kids at your meetings, right? We all do this for the kids, but sometimes as board members, we get so removed from the kids that we forget why we're doing this. And so having those wonderful, bright faces at a meeting every so often is just so important. Even if you're bringing a Cub Scout troop in to lead the Pledge of Allegiance, any kind of recognitions, the one warning about recognitions is certainly make sure you treat them all the same, right? If you bring in the women's soccer team and give them certificates, you better have certificates for every athletic team that comes before you. So, and the other thing too is nice is I'm sure with social media, you're always looking for photo opportunities. Whenever kids are here, it's nice for the board to actually get up, have their picture taken with whoever's getting recognized. And it's also a nice break for the president to be able to say to the audience, because you're going to get the parents, right? If the kids are here, we have more on our agenda. You are welcome to stay, but we understand it's a school night. So please feel free to leave. And if you're standing up and not sitting here in your formal meeting, it's a little bit easier for them to feel more comfortable and kind of sneaking out. So
John and everybody has always done it since I've been on. Well, we hired, even before you were here though, that was always, if there's students and parents coming in, that's always first on the list.
Good.
And then it's always, hey, you can stay for the boring part now, but we understand dinner is waiting at home. Feel free, they've done a great job.
Good.
Ever since I've been on, it's always been that way. So
Good.
It's very
So,
accommodating.
yeah, I was going to say, so both sides feel comfortable. Good. And you realize we had this brief conversation before we started that Megan's only requirement with taking minutes is to capture those resolutions, the motions and the vote as they came through. But how important with your live streaming that people can see what the conversation was. They can know why Lori made the decision that she did. So your treasurer has a lot more important things to do than minutes. So just be appreciative that they can be short and sweet and posted, and that's it.
Terry, I have one question. And it has to do with students being here. With being on the Vanguard Sentinel board, I know that a couple of the other associate schools from there have tried it and maybe still do it. Is there much as far as a student liaison that is on the board? And have you seen is there big benefits of that? I know Tiffin City did it. I don't know if they still currently do it. And I think they have a senior that would come and they would be kind of the official student body representative. But
Sure.
They would have to be at every board meeting. Not that they voted on anything,
Right.
but and I'm not sure how they encapsulated that.
Sure.
But is there a lot of that? And have you seen what's the pros and cons?
Sure.
Or
There are really two sides to the story about having a student board member, or at least a liaison to your board. One of the real important issues for that is if you have a very vocal student body at your high school, right? They like to be engaged. They come to meetings. They want to have a voice. If they are looking for a voice with the Board of Education, that's a good place to start. The problem is once you start it, you can never give it up. And the second issue is that sometimes it backfires because it's kind of a popularity contest, right? The person who is already in everything, National Honor Society, captain of the football team, is usually the person that gets nominated to serve on the board. So having a system where you have an application and an interview process and it's very objective is extremely important. We have very few districts that have gone this direction. The one district that I've seen, and I refer people to them all the time if you want to have any conversation about it, is Delaware City. They've had a student board member for years, and it's worked very well for them. So I would say a conversation with them about whether it's a good idea, what should we watch out for, would be, if you're even thinking about, would be good.
Okay. Thank
you.
Thanks for asking that, Tom, because that's something I never.
What's that?
I said thank you for asking that because that's something I never
Yeah.
thought about. I know
I
we
think-
talk a lot about kids and the things
I
that
think
they
it was maybe
do.
like a few years ago.
We talked about it, but
we
never really.
talked about it. Never,
Took
nothing
off,
in
yeah.
concrete. Nothing even started. Like, okay, what is that process? We never got to that point.
Right.
And I just, the board member from Tiffin brought that student board member one time to a Vanguard Sentinel board
Uh-huh.
meeting just for a different view of stuff.
Sure.
And it just has always been just a question. I wonder
Sure.
how that works. And
Yeah.
so,
Is the legality and the confidentiality, those are big.
Yeah,
issues.
it can be an issue. Now, I would say most districts do not have the student in executive session. So they are not a full-fledged board member by any means. Obviously, they're not elected. But again, those would be some of the pitfalls that I would think you'd want to have a conversation with a district that's done it for a long time and see. And I'm sure they have a policy. You'd have to have some kind of policy on how that was going to be. You certainly would want it to be a senior, but that also means then that you lose them, because they graduate and you have to start over. So some kind of succession planning would be a good thing. Okay. Executive session, certainly, there's 6 legal reasons, and I'm sure Megan will keep you on target with those, and that you're very conscientious about putting the one reason that you're going in or the 2 or 3 reasons you're going in, and you have to be very, very careful, even when it's just the 5 or 7 of you, to stick to that topic, right? That you don't sway off into another topic. Some districts go in for one, come back out, go in for another, come back out kind of thing if you have more than one need. Do you always put executive session, the words, on an agenda?
It's our last item of business in case we want to go into executive session. It's on there. Yes.
I would say to you, we have seen in the past couple of years, it would behoove you to only put it on when you think you might need
Really?
one.
Okay.
You don't have to have it. And if you don't have it on, all you have to do is make a motion to go into executive session. You can add it. But we have kind of a problem group of people out there who are going around to different reports and trying to say that because it's always at the end, the board just kind of whizzes through the whole agenda to get to the good stuff, right? That they're really not doing any kind of business until they get into executive session. And it's just a perception issue. And so oftentimes it helps with transparency. And again, if your community has not been saying anything, don't change your practice. But we are finding more and more districts are not putting it on every agenda, just so people realize we're thoughtful about when we need
We actually
executive
had
session.
it on both ends. Originally, when I first came to
Okay.
the district, we had one at the beginning of the agenda and one at the end. And was there every time.
Yeah.
So we did get away from that.
And is this normally where you meet?
Yes.
And
Well,
do you
No, we move around a lot, but this is probably the most
most
common.
frequent?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you all get up and go to another room for executive session? Good. That's another thing that we have people who have started trying to listen outside doors, right, to hear what's being said. And so the other thing is, it's just nicer if you don't say to people in the audience, please get up and leave because we're going into executive session, but rather you get up and leave and say, we'll come back after executive session. There won't be any further business, so feel free to go ahead and leave. Or we're coming back and we're going to have a vote about something, so if you'd like to stay. Again, using your words, right? It's just like kindergarten. Just use your words. It's amazing.
The right word.
Yeah.
The having guests, we would say to you that there should never be an executive session without your treasurer and superintendent unless you're doing one or the other's evaluation, only because everything that you should be discussing would ultimately end up being their responsibility. And so that having them in there for that conversation. But executive session is really the time that you all can be honest with each other, right? And you can agree to disagree, or you can hash something out. You just have to stick to that topic for the reason that you went into executive session. And then you have to trust each other. You have to trust that no one's going to leave executive session and talk about something. And most often, the real reason for that is that you don't want someone to think a decision is going to be made because of the conversation that happened. Because you can have a conversation in executive committee, and then when you ultimately vote, it could be an entirely different decision that happens. We've had a couple situations where teachers, it was a big enough issue that the superintendent recommended a teacher come into executive session and plead their case, right? You in executive session should never have conversation before the guest leaves. You listen and maybe one or two clarifying questions, but we've had teachers leave and say, oh yeah, from the conversation, I know they're going to support me, kind of thing, right? So just make sure that you respect the confidentiality of executive session, and that will help build trust among each other too, that you know you can say something and it's not going to be out there.
You just mentioned, excuse me, real quick. You just mentioned something about us locked eyes with Megan about executive session that both the superintendent and the treasurer should be there. Mm-hmm. Is that an and or? Is that a?
I would say it's and. Yeah. Again, don't change practice if it's working, but
practice, it's working.
That's just a suggestion.
That's what we feel is the best practice, only because these are the two employees that report to you, and these are the two employees you're going to trust with your decision that it's going to happen. And they usually have all the answers, right? Every time something comes up that you're talking about.
Not. Stick with him.
So I think I have shown Andy videos here before, but we have a challenging board member, right? Good heart, but Andy doesn't always do the right thing. And so we kind of use these videos as an example of how things could go and not go well.
Andy, I'm glad I ran into you.
Hey,
Want to know what's going on with the school board? Has the entire board gone nuts?
I'd be surprised if we have. Why would you say that? Or is that just your way of supporting your local school
You
board?
know very well what I'm talking about. How can the school board stand by and let Hank Fisher be suspended without giving him a reason why? Everybody knows he keeps the high school students in line, no drugs, no alcohol. We won't find another principal like him.
Hey, nobody hates us more than I do. And the entire board sees it the same way.
Well, if that's the case, then let's put him back on his job and move on. The community's in an uproar. Nobody knows what's going on, or even why Hank's been suspended. Not even Hank.
Oh, well, Hank knows why he was suspended.
He said he didn't. How do you know he does?
Because we discussed it in closed executive session.
Oh, so why was he suspended?
We're not supposed to talk about it outside of a closed session, okay? But there is a good reason for his suspension.
Oh, I can't see any reason to let a man like Hank go.
He was accused of sexual harassment by 3 teachers. Hey, don't tell anybody you heard that from me.
You know I won't tell anyone.
Okay, so like so many things wrong with this. But it really probably won't be an issue until you really have some of those tough decisions and people want to know why. Why are you doing this? I found that when we just started talking about drug testing athletes in the mid-90s at Olentangy, and it was a hot topic, and people were all the way from, angry to ecstatic that we were going to offer this. And it's hard when you can't give all the information that you know, right? So finding the words that feel comfortable to say, we're making a decision based on what we know and the facts we have, and we'll be voting on it next week, or whatever that answer is that doesn't share what you're going to do, but that you are doing it and that you are respecting the confidentiality of that. So sometimes it's not easy because, of course, people have to know everything. So the board meeting, when things go well, it really is true that the board sets the culture for the school district. And so it's extremely important that you all are having productive, respectful meetings, that you're all getting the same information. There are very few times that the president should have information ahead of you. President, you're all 5 equal members. President's role is to run an effective meeting. That's truly the only purpose. Now, sometimes there might be a really volatile, highly confidential issue that John's going to call Tom first and say, okay, let me just kind of talk this through. But then immediately the other 4 board members should be informed. And we talk a lot about how important it is to have those 2 or 3 talking points, because if something does happen at your school, you all are going to get the calls, right? Every child that texts their parent knows a board member, they're going to be calling and say, what's going on? And so not John necessarily, because he's got to deal with the issue, but maybe his admin, maybe it's Megan. Someone needs to call all 5 members and say, there's a fire in the dumpster in the middle school parking lot. The fire department's here. No students were involved. Just something so that you all have 2 or 3 talking points and stay out of the way and let them handle it. But it is amazing. I mean, we have ambulances showing up at our school buildings all the time now, right? For student issues and problems. Everyday things, you do not need to be informed, but the bigger things, you definitely need to know ahead of time. So I don't know how you handle that.
I usually email as quickly as I can, just say, hey, this happened. If you hear about it, this is what it is. So sometimes if it's much bigger, then I get on the phone and try to make sure they know what's going on.
Okay. And again, when he emails you, just respond to him. If you have any questions or say, let me know if I can help, just respond to him. Don't do the reply all. Yeah.
And I think you do a really good job with that. There's never a time where I feel like I see something that I'm not already aware of that has a bigger impact on the community or the school community. So
good.
Trying to figure out what I think might blow up and say, so because it's going to come at you and someone's going to, and they feel more confident, like you said, to have something to say.
Mm-hmm.
So then they're informed, they're in the know, but they don't maybe have all the details.
And they're not solving it. Right. Yeah, that's perfect.
John's always been real thought. My wife is a school teacher.
Okay.
So a lot of times she'll get home from school. Tom, did you? Yeah, I knew. Well, how'd you know?
John let me know. As he should.
Teachers think they're always the first to know, but that's not the case.
That's good. Yep. I'm glad to hear that. And the final thing I wanted to talk about with board meetings is certainly managing public participation. And I would assume since you're OSBA, you have 3 minutes per person, half an hour. Are you using a timer?
Yes.
A visual timer that people can see?
I usually set it to sound off. So when it goes, then I actually have it audible so that everybody knows the minute.
We are finding, though, that one of the bigger facing your audience is becoming almost mandatory, so people see the countdown.
Otherwise,
so
they're trusting me that I've set it to 5 and not 3.
And they're not allowed to trust sometimes. And I would tell you, you can see on this is my new suggestion, is we have always called it public participation, and it can stay that way in your policies. But in my opinion, it should be called public comment, because you're not participating. You're not having a conversation. You are listening, and you're letting them tell you whatever they want to tell you. So they're commenting. And so I went to our legal staff and said, can they put public comment on their agenda? And they said, absolutely. Even if it says public participation, sometimes it helps if it's on the agenda as public comment. Again, giving the message that this is your time to listen, their time to talk. Do you put your policy out with your sign-in sheet when the
Actually,
people
we have
come in?
a shortened version of it on the podium so people can see it as they come up to the podium.
Good.
And Mr. Price typically would announce kind of what the limits are. It's this much time, and so forth.
And do you also say that this is the board's time to listen, so we won't be commenting?
Yeah, and we've had a couple times with that where we've had a parent or a grandparent want to know about their son or grandkid and why this happened. And,
Sure.
And we say, we've in the past year, whoever was the president running was just like, we understand that you want an answer, but that's not our role here.
Right.
But thank you for bringing that information to us, and we'll make sure that,
And that's it, the thank you, and then the follow-up. If you need to say, Superintendent Detweiler, will you get back to them tomorrow, or whatever that kind of next step?
Yeah, John usually speaks right up and says, you know what? And he's writing it down. He takes notes like crazy. So he's usually like, yep, I'm going to check on that. And Mr. Smith, I'm going to call you tomorrow and let you know what's the next step.
Good.
So
I think that was hard for me as a new board member, is to realize that I don't have all the information about what they're discussing. So it really I could make a mistake by saying something. So the reality is making sure you're making eye contact, right? And you're not, do you use Chromebooks or?
We're reissuing Chromebooks. We had them for a while. They weren't really being used. We're going to try that again.
So make sure that you're not, of course, looking down at the laptop, that you're looking at them, you're listening, you're nodding, acknowledging that you hear them. But, for example, the mother could come and complain about little Harold not being picked up by the school bus. And your first reaction is, oh my gosh, when in reality, little Harold was suspended from the school bus. And so we just don't have that information, and it's not your role to solve those kind of problems, right? They're usually here because they've heard the answer. They don't like it, but that's, again, not, you're at that 30,000 foot level. You're not running the district, you're governing the district.
I think that's a very important piece to consistently keep in mind. A lot of us are just natural problem solvers.
Absolutely.
In our roles, in our, life outside of being board members. So when that's something I learned real quick. When information comes to us, you automatically go into that. Okay, well, let's solve the problem.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's not yours to solve, Sarah. So pass the information on.
Yeah.
And
that is so true. We are all type A when we serve, aren't we? We just want to get it fixed. Yeah.
The one thing I appreciate when I first got on the board is I went to the new board training down in Columbus, and OSBA does a great job of saying, remember, when somebody comes to you, you're part of the Board of Education. Unless the other 4 members are with you, you don't answer.
Right.
Because you're answering as the Board of Education. You're not answering as Tom Price.
Right.
You have to answer.
Even if you use the words, even if you say I'm only one board member, that's not the perception.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point.
Right. I'm still the board member that they're coming to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They drove that home, and I just, it's always been in the back of my head. Don't answer, Tom, because you're not all 5 people.
Right. And you can't predict what all 5 of you would decide to do. Public participation, again, as we've talked about, is not engaging in that kind of dialogue, but making sure that you do thank them and you are listening. But what happens if things get really, really bad? And we saw some of this, particularly when we had mask issues. Those were always fun discussions. So we would say to you, first of all, they don't have to live in your district to speak, right? So you have to allow them to speak. They have First Amendment rights of free speech, but they don't have a right to disrupt your meeting. And this is what our attorney wrote. When an audience becomes so uncontrollable that the public body can't deliberate, it would seem that the audience waives its right under sunshine law to continue to observe the proceedings. Now, that said, because we've seen this happen a lot, our best practice is not for you to try and have somebody hauled out or the deputy sheriff on duty. If you have someone who is so upset and you've tried your words, right? Not even the gavel necessarily, but you've said, please don't keep saying the student's name, that violates FERPA, or please don't use bad language. If you've used your words and that person is still so inconsolable and uncontrollable, we would recommend you adjourn the meeting. You don't try and say, please have so-and-so removed, because it just splits the group, right? Half the people will be like cheering that you're taking him out. The other half will be, he has a right to speak. And we've just seen it happen so much lately that when it really gets that heated, that you're better off somebody make the motion to adjourn and you all leave the room. Does that feel comfortable? It's not fun, but it really is. It's a safer thing to do too, because we just don't know what can happen these days.
So then call a special meeting to, or how would you?
You'd have to reschedule with a special,
Okay.
yeah, to get the rest of the work done.
Okay.
And I think that's fair for the president to say, can I have a motion to adjourn because we cannot continue the meeting of the board? Again, these things are never going to happen in Fremont, but we are just telling you, be prepared. Do we need a break or keep going?
Okay.
You're okay? We'll let the chickens get across the road here. Okay, so now I have some scenarios. The district is considering a bond issue for a new high school wing. Board member Sam is opposed because he believes people can't afford it. He's been very vocal about this, but he knows other board members think the new wing is the best call. How should he and the board move forward? First of all, it's one of the things that I said earlier is making sure that you have conversations about this way ahead of a vote, right? That you have presentations, you'd have, what if we did this? What if we did that kind of conversation, so that people know that you've done your homework and that the board member can be able to say, well, I still don't want any new taxes, but they have done their homework, right? They have proven that we are going to outgrow this building, that we have this number of students coming in, that they're building this number of houses, whatever those kind of facts and figures and data show that the need is really there. And then, of course, once the majority votes, say nothing. I didn't support it, but the board voted and we're moving forward.
John, are we done building?
No, I'm still going, Don. You wait. No. $100 million isn't enough.
In our scenario, we're done.
We're done. Yeah,
Not financially closed, but thanks to us.
You do have gorgeous buildings, though.
Yeah.
You're very
Actually, Don,
fortunate.
just to that point, we had the one connector between the pool and the high school is really kind of the last thing that's on that list. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, other than the
Right.
other just regular stuff. So.
And that was discussed earlier on when the project was
Correct.
going.
Correct. At length. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're hesitant in a meeting to have that discussion that could start to sway people one way or the other. Like, you don't want to say, I don't think we should do this, or I think we should do this, until you know kind of how the flavor's going to go. But the reality is, they're going to respect you more for talking about it and for having that discussion of the pros and cons and the options that you have. I think we covered that. And then also, once you make the decision, is to make sure that you do explain it to the community again and again, because they will always say, you didn't tell us that.
So when you say, you're saying, the president would kind of restate at the
Those
end of
top
that.
2 or 3 talking points. You know, we voted to add a new wing to the high school because we have a growing student population. We need the space for new teaching areas, whatever those 2 or top 3, and you got a good price on architect or whatever those top 2 or 3 talking points, really critical on those tough decisions for him to reiterate why the majority voted yes.
Right.
Yeah, great point.
And he can always throw it over to the superintendent.
Volley.
That's why you're sitting next to each other. So you can.
So I think I have another Andy video now.
Oh, look who's here.
According to the demographic study that we had conducted, we're going to need a new high school in less than 5 years.
Do we have an architect yet?
No, but we need to talk about that tonight.
No, that won't take long. I have a really good one in mind.
Well, the staff is prepared to recommend a process for selecting architects.
I don't think we should waste time on developing a process. I have a friend from college who's an architect, and he does outstanding work. And he's part of an excellent architectural firm, Build Good and Strong.
Well, I would like to hear from several architectural firms to make sure we get the best one for school construction. Has your friend done school construction?
Oh, I'm sure he has. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we hire Build Good and Strong as our architect.
And go.
Do I hear a second?
Okay, so first of all, objective process is always the best way to handle anything, right? Make sure you do the same steps for each kind of major decision. And one of them is doing your homework ahead of time and letting all of the board as well as the community see the thought process as you go through it. Secondly, anytime you're making a decision about hiring, whether it's a firm or an employee, it is important for you to make sure that people understand that they're not getting the job because they knew a board member, right? It's not fair to a person coming on for people to even have that question about, did they get this because they're the best person or because they knew somebody? So making sure that you always kind of keep that top of mind, even if there's not very many times that you could abstain or should legally abstain. But I believe that one of the times that is a good thing is if you are hiring someone who because you're a smaller community, everybody knows everybody, right? If people know you're best friends with the new football coach that's going to get the position, you're going to say, you know what? I'm going to abstain because I don't want anybody to think that John is getting the job because he's friends with a board member. He is getting the job because he went through the same process as all the other applicants and he's the best person for the job. So just having a realization that people will focus more on perceptions than reality, right? And again, having that time of discussion is so important. Building trust with your community, certainly respecting the CEO and the CFO and making sure that they can lead and that they're accountable, having time that people realize the expertise that you have in your hiring is important. Committees. Tell me about, do you have board committees?
Yes.
Which ones are they?
Policy, finance, CQCC, health and wellness. I think those ones that pop into my head. Yeah.
Again, don't change what you're doing if it's working, but we are finding more and more districts are using less board committees and more superintendent committees. Board members can still serve on a superintendent committee, but it doesn't have the requirement of a meeting notice, public session, an agenda, some of the requirements that board committees have to have. So even though you want to get the work done and you want to do it by committee, there are options, is what I would say to you. You can do as a committee of a whole. You can do superintendent committees.
So Terry, we just did our organizational meeting. Obviously did all those things. Would it be appropriate to redo that or just wait, make a note for next year?
I would do it next year.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, just and have a conversation during the year about what committees, because again, you can serve on any superintendent committees. Board committee really raises it to a level of higher involvement than sometimes you need, because you can have a superintendent committee and still come back and report to the board what's being done. Some boards that have lower trust levels are always concerned, and particularly with a facilities committee. And I saw this happen on a board. One board member was chaired the facilities committee. It was a board committee, and he came to a board meeting and started telling them he picked out the doorknobs for the new high school. He hired the architect. He did. And it was a committee. Again, nothing can be done without a board vote, but that committee empowered him to start running the district instead of governing the district. And again, that's what you have to remember, that you're governing. So you're making the suggestions that should happen.
Excuse me, John.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of how we're already doing it?
Yeah, and I think we're probably running the same standard for both
superintendent.
sets. I mean, process-wise, because we really don't treat them differently that much.
Okay. We have a white paper that I'd be glad to send you on committees that would be more of a conversation that you could have about your committees and how they're working.
Thank you.
So each board member has received an email from community member John. However, John tells each in the email that he's writing them alone. He has a complaint about the band director. What should each board member do with this email?
Go to John.
We would say that a conversation should happen that you decide either board president or superintendent is going to answer the email, right? But because you don't know for sure that they got it, you're going to forward yours to that person to make sure that they have it. And then you're going to respond, because you want to be responsive. You're going to respond to the person saying, "Thank you for your email. I forwarded it to the superintendent." You're not going to try and answer, because you're one of 5, right? And so 5 different answers is not going to be a good idea, but you want it to get answered. So making sure that it goes to John or president, whichever you decide. I would say most often we see that you send them all to the superintendent, because most often they're running the district kind of issues. Does that feel comfortable the way you're doing it now?
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is the anonymous email. In our opinion, if someone can't sign their name or tries to block who they are, then that doesn't need to be answered, right? And if they have a true concern, they're going to tell you who they are and why they have that concern. Communication. Again, making sure that your social media, in our world, best practice would be that you are only sharing on your personal social media what the district has already shared. Do you have a communications person?
Yes.
Full-time?
Not full-time.
Great. Part-time.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how well worth that is for the amount of opportunities that you get. In districts where the superintendent has to do all the communication, there's not time to get all those positive stories out, right? You're just putting out fires. And so to have the ability to have a person that can focus on getting the good stuff out there that your district is doing, your schools are doing, your kids are doing, is really wonderful. So because those things are out there, it's very easy for you to share them on your personal social media. The problem that we talked about before with you trying to give information on your own, on your personal social media, is that people will automatically jump to this is a board position, right? Even if you say, my personal opinion is we should build a new elementary building, it is going to start a conversation that is not a board decision or not happening during a board meeting. So you really have to be very cautious. And it's, arguing on Facebook never gets anybody anywhere. So, but it's tough. And I would say to you, when you see postings that you really know are inaccurate or wrong, letting John know about those so that the district can respond, or John can respond at the next meeting, right? Saying, I want to let you know that there was a posting on Facebook that is inaccurate. Here's the reality. Never speaking for the board. We talked about that. I think we've covered most of those. So some of the best practices, certainly that consistency and minding the message, and those talking points that we said how important they are for you are also important for the communications person, right? Because those news releases that go out have to have the top 2 or 3 reasons why you made this decision. So everybody is saying the same thing, and that's extremely helpful, and it gives the media their story. Do you normally have media at your meetings?
We used to.
Yeah.
Our
They're
local
probably
media,
listening, right?
it's all gone global. So we don't have as much as we used to.
Yeah.
I get a follow-up call every day after the meeting from the radio station asking for what's going on, but that's really the only regular media that we have.
Okay. And do you let the communications person handle that then?
I do those.
You do those.
Yeah.
Okay. We've talked about having kids at your meetings, rotating locations, and I'm curious first why you rotate meetings.
Yeah, it's usually because an event. We like the big space out here because we can see. We thought it was a little safer too because we thought we were a little pinched in here, especially through COVID when things were pretty tense, right?
Sure.
So we've tried to go out to the auditorium. Then if there's a basketball game like there was tonight, we get kind of shuffled here. If there's an event here and there, or if we have a greater group, we go to the Performing Arts Center. So we really have been a nomad.
But people are used to that, right? They know
it
that
seems.
double check where it is.
Issues that we know of. We try to get that word out as quickly as possible.
Good. There are a couple of really good strategies for moving your meetings, and I've seen them work effectively in 2 situations. One was a district that their buildings were literally falling down, particularly the elementary, and they might not have been as conducive for a board meeting, but boy, this district had a board meeting in every one of those buildings, so that when people did come to the meeting, they saw ceiling tiles falling. They saw, the flooring coming up. So it was a strategy before they ever got close to a bond issue to build new to show the condition of their buildings. The other strategy was that it was a local school district that had a lot of little burgs, right? Townships, villages within their school district. And people were feeling isolated, like they didn't feel a part of the bigger district. And so the board started rotating meetings. Like once a year, they'd go to a township hall and have their meetings so that they could say, we're coming to you. Please come. We want to hear the issues for your township kind of thing. So not just because you can't make the location, but sometimes there's kind of a bigger strategy to taking your meetings somewhere else. Communication plan. Do you have your communications person develop any kind of plan annually?
Yeah, actually, not that, but we just have recently engaged a public relations firm to help us sort of up our game a little bit.
Good.
So, yeah, we're trying to do a little better.
I know you're writing all this down. I will send you a template that we have that we suggest as a communication plan for our Board of Education. Great. And even if you have a person doing communications, I would suggest to you that take time, maybe on one of your work sessions agendas, to go through that plan, to talk about here's all of our different audiences. Here's all the vehicles that we use to reach them. Even a digital sign out in front of a building is a vehicle to reach people. So you need to get credit for all the things you're doing because you're going to always hear, you didn't tell us that, we didn't know that. So at least have something on your website that says, we've tried to be thoughtful. If we're missing something, let us know. We'll be glad to do placemats in the local restaurant or whatever those things might be that people will feel like they're hearing information about your district. And certainly surveying is always important. And the one caveat about surveying is always, always, always tell your results, right? Nothing can hurt you worse than asking their opinion on a bunch of different things and then never saying what people said, because then they think, oh, it was all negative, so now you're just not telling us. No, here's what we heard in aggregate. So even if it's a couple questions on the homepage of your website, it's important to ask what people think long before you'd ever need a bond issue or a levy issue, because you want continual input. So finding the way that feels comfortable for that. Celebrating your district, like we talked about, having people, kids at your meetings, citizens that have been very helpful for your school district. Sometimes there's a Subway who continually gives you a discount on, feeding kids and those kind of things. Like I said, are really important. Just make sure that you always do the same thing, right? Take their picture, give them a certificate, whatever that is. Board member Deb is a great writer. She'd like to contribute an editorial to the local paper about progress with the district's strategic plan. Should this happen, and if so, how? This goes back to talking about how you all bring a different talent or many talents to the board and appreciating that and using that, right? The caveat with this would be all the board agrees that it's okay for Deb to write it, that you talk about it in a meeting, it's not being done by email, and that you all agree that she, did a great job and this is what we're ready to say, that we can do that. Now, concern would be if you have a communications person, is this really necessary? So maybe you say to the board member, will you work with our communications person and write that? Any other thoughts about that?
Would it be ever appropriate to put a letter out that has every board's signature on it? Every member's
absolutely.
signature? Yeah.
Or just, Fremont City Schools,
Right.
Board of Education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the things that we find oftentimes in districts is that there hasn't been, because they don't have a communications person, there hasn't really been an organized approach to communication. The IT person develops the website. A elementary teacher is doing Facebook postings. Again, it's all kind of, the treasurer sends out the news releases because she sends out the meeting notices. It's kind of disjointed. So having a conversation about communications, that communications plan, and some kind of session at least once a year with your communications person would be valuable. I think we've talked about social media, that your public and private lives have now blurred, and that you are a board member 24/7 and you can't speak on behalf of the district, which you're well aware, but and the reality is you can't just go and take pictures like at the football game, because you don't know which students can't have their picture shown for some reason. Or there's an issue with permission. So again, making sure that you share what the district shares is usually the best bet. We talked about the communication plan, strategic plan. We all know that you have limited time and limited resources. And so a strategic plan says to your community, this is what we're going to focus on this year. When we come out and do strategic planning with a district, the plan is not for more than 1 or 2 years. Things just start changing too fast in this world, and you can't do this 5 to 10 year plan and put it in a book and put it on a shelf. Those days are gone. The strategic plan needs to be a living document. It needs to be online. It needs to be updated regularly. It needs to have who's responsible and some kind of timeline. And so making sure that you have at least a conversation once a year about your strategic plan, about your vision and about your mission and the goals that you want to see for this year. And the goals of the board should be the goals of the district, should be the goals for the superintendent and treasurer. And more importantly, what they do every single day needs to be given credit, right? You don't do a strategic plan and come up with 18 new things that you're going to do. You make a list of what they're currently doing and how it fits under our finance goal, because you get more buy-in, right? Teachers, administrators don't want to say, oh yeah, board came up with 6 new things for us to do, as if we're not busy enough and totally swamped to begin with. So it gives you those long-term goals. I think we've talked about that, the framework. When we do strategic planning, we actually say that we think it's very important for you to have a representative of every stakeholder audience that you have and bring them together to do that brainstorming kind of thing. But at a minimum, it should be a conversation that you have at one of your work sessions about what are 2 top goals that we want to see for the next school year kind of conversation. So I looked on the website and I very easily found your mission statement and your vision statement. And I think these are great. Know that we are really moving away from sentences in mission and vision statements. You'll see more and more school district using bullet points or phrases without it being a whole sentence, just so people can remember it. So it pops so that people know that you are really, this is what you're focusing on. But these are fabulous and they work. And again, I think they tell people what the expectation is at Fremont City Schools. So make sure you have that discussion, talk during your board meeting, during the discussion time. You're sitting facing each other and having those 2 or 3 top talking points, the reason for your vote. Anything else that I haven't touched on or that you would like to talk about?
I do have a question.
Okay,
so you're saying about, moving the meetings to different locations possibly. So is the object to that to get as many people to a meeting, or what is the object of a good successful board meeting? To have an audience, or?
No, the object is to get the work done, but you also have to be sure that you're saying to your community, we want to hear from you. You're important. You're part of this school district. You don't want to move your meetings so often they're like, well, where are they now? I can't even find where they are, right? That's not the strategy. But the reality is most districts have very little people at their meetings. But the importance of you saying to them, we are here and you're welcome. The importance of you live streaming so that people can watch from their home. That's extremely important. It shows that you care about what they think and that you want them to know what their school board's doing.
Okay.
You mentioned having 2 meetings a month and how important that was. I think, Terry, for us, it's given us a chance to bring student groups and high achievers and, staff's highlights and things like that we probably wouldn't have done if we only had 1 meeting a month.
Because otherwise you start business like at, 8 o'clock at night, and by 10, you're all tired, as I'm sure they would be too. So yeah, I think that's great that you're doing it in 2 meetings. It does give you the luxury of having more recognitions and discussion.
And so maybe advertise more to remind people that it's available for live stream. And
I think that's always important. People that want to know are going to find out. But I don't know that it's as much publicizing it as committing to it, that you are live streaming and they have that option. I think they probably hear and know you're doing it, but
yeah, I would assume
they've got other things to do. And you know what? It could be a really high level of trust with your community. They know they have 5 board members. They know they have great leaders, and they know you're going to get the business done. just because you don't hear from a few negative doesn't mean there's a lot of positives that are out there supporting what you're doing. They don't feel a need to check.
I think, no, I think that is a lot of the case. I mean, just from what I hear, from what people tell me personally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Good.
Well, I know there's a lot of people that watch it online that don't come in because they'll tell me, "Oh yeah, I watched the board meeting," or "The board meeting. What time is that?"
Sure.
So
I really think it's a positive. I'm so glad you've continued that. Well, I won't keep you. If you have anything else, I am always here. I would encourage you, call me anytime, and I'll give you my cell number. And also call our legal hotline. That is always free to any of you, including John and Megan, and is a good place to start for free, right? It's like, what questions should I ask before you bring your school attorney in that does cost you money? Or maybe it's a parliamentary procedure question, any of those kind of things that you can email them or call them for free. So know that that's a really nice service, and particularly for president. You know, as you know, something's going to come up, and what if this happens? Can I table? Can I postpone? Those kinds of questions. So it's nice to have them available. And my cell, if you ever need anything, is 614-323-3219. Text or call.
24 hours a day, right there.
24/7. It is amazing. I have taken calls 24/7. I'd rather help ahead of time than somebody to call and say, oops, we did this. How do we get out of it? Well, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very
much.
much.
Terry.
All right.
I think this just kind of shows, though. I mean, just at our last meeting, we approved to be a member of OSBA.
Right.
I mean, this is just one more reason why
Yeah.
districts are, because the information that they provide, the help that they provide, the change in policies when the Senate decides to change a word in something, to, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it is definitely money well spent. That's for sure. I'm not sure how a district would do it on their own.
No. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
We'll move on.
Yeah, let's move on. That's really my report tonight. Nothing else that's too hot out there. We'll have a meeting in a couple weeks and do that. But I did have some stuff on here that I would like to, if it's okay, we'll get through this quickly. Some time sensitive stuff we'd like to move on. So
sure.
If I may, moving on with item 1, our donations. We always like to keep those as current as possible. We've got Peace Lutheran Church. I found that that's in Deschler. We're not exactly sure what the connection is, but we are thankful for the Peace Lutheran Church. We think there must be a family connection or something. I'm trying to do a little sleuthing so I can find out what that's about. St. John's Lutheran Church with gloves, hats, and scarves, and our VFW post 2947 for socks and underwear. Just always a fabulous group.
Mr. Dewell, just to clarify then, the district sends a thank you.
Yes.
Anytime we see this
Absolutely.
listed?
So the next morning, Gina will have these. She actually probably has them ready on my desk. I will sign them. I actually write a little thank you note, a little smiley face on there, and say thank you so much for thinking of us and so forth. So,
okay, super.
Yeah.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve item 1, please?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Bloom. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Nally. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mr. Nally,
Yes.
Ms. Lehman,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes, motion's approved.
thank you very much. Item 2 is our annual re-sign up with Sandusky Board of DD. I kind of got an update today. We have 10 students that are currently of our residential students who are at the School of Hope, and 7 students in our pre-K with special needs. So this is our contract with them to continue those services for some of our most high-need students.
Can I get a motion to approve item 2, please?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Lewis. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Lehman. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Ms. Lehman,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mr. Nally,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes, motion's approved.
Thank you very much. Item 3 is contract with Unity Counseling. This is the mental health services. And just for those who have been on the board for a while, we had a couple years ago an opportunity to join with the Community Health Services to build a clinic on site. that grant fell through, but we had done some grant work on our own to try to support mental health supports for students. And that's what we've been able to do with this money. So we're pretty excited to still be able to offer those services to our students, even though we didn't get that big grant. It would have helped us build a clinic. So that's what item 3 is.
Can I get a motion to approve item 3, please?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Nally. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bloom. Any discussion?
Are these services in addition to services that we already have
Correct.
in the
That's
district?
right. It's above and
Okay.
beyond. So we're very excited about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Just real quick, when talking about the health clinic, with CHS, is there any possibility of that coming up at a later date for grants?
I do think that's a regular cycle grant.
Okay.
So I anticipate that would be on the radar again at some point. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Roll call, please.
Mr. Nally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Ms. Lehman,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes. Motion's approved.
Mr. Price, if I may quickly on that, I know in talking to Joe Lychek, who's the director of health services, he said his board is really interested in making something happen with the schools. I think they really would like to see something happen. So I think it's not dead.
Good.
Yeah.
Great.
So just for that.
Good.
Item 4 is our membership in High School Athletic Association, which gets us all of our tournament action and recognition for state and everything else. So with your permission, we'll do that again.
Could I have a motion to approve item 4, please?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Lewis. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Lehman. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Ms. Lehman,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Mr. Nally,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes. Motion's approved.
Item 5 is kind of fun. These are our early grads. These are students who have worked extra hard and gotten ahead, and life has called them to move on, so they've decided to do that. So with your permission tonight, we have item 5, which I think about 15 or so students who have earned enough credit to graduate. And I did check. They are eligible to walk in the spring if they would so choose. So
Okay.
just so you know, they can still participate with that ceremony.
Can I get a motion to approve item 5, please?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Nally. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bloom. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Nally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Ms. Lehman,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes. Motion's approved.
Thank you very much. Moving into our personnel items here, starting with number 6, we have 3 resignations: George Hebben, Michelle Biddle, and Nikki Holland. Item 7, we have appointments: Jerica Martin, Aloysius Fabro. And then on the next page, we have staff substitutes of Aloysius Fabro, Lynn Reinig, and Tina Myers, a name you might recognize. Adelaide Stover as well. Item 8, supplemental contracts. This is for Mr. Malo, our business teacher at Ross. He had started the investment club. I pointed to Gina today, said, I think Ginvest is misspelled. No, that's on purpose. It's not a typo. That's the name of his club. So that approves his investment club, which has actually been very well received by students. Item 9, supplemental duty positions. If you go down the list there, you see Jensen Lejeune, Laura Manning, and Madeline Overmeyer as trainers. Our own Doc Hershey was injured for a good, and just off work for a little while, so we had to have some help. So that's what those are about. Item 10 then, there are 4 status changes for Candy Kane, Tanya Conley, Sherry Corthell, and Dana Filiator. Those are our personnel items for this evening.
All right. Can I get a motion to approve items 6 through 10, please?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Lewis. Could I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bloom. Any discussion?
I do have one question,
Yes, ma'am.
and this is just a me thing.
Mhm.
If somebody puts in a resignation, do you guys ever follow up and make sure there's never any issues? You know, I guess some hard
Like
feelings.
an
on
exit
why-
interview of sorts.
Yeah, making
Yeah.
sure there was no problems of why they were leaving the school system and anything. And if there was, if anything, we can help them with.
Yeah, we do. I don't think we have a formal process, Ms. Lehman, but we do typically try to find out what were the issues, what was going on. And most of them have very understandable reasons, moving, changing, things like that. So, yeah, we do
Okay.
try to follow up on that because we want to make sure everybody's happy to be here. So,
Yeah.
for sure.
Alrighty.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Ms. Lehman,
Yes.
Mr. Nally,
Yes.
Mr. Price.
Yes, motion's approved. All right, moving on to report of the treasurer.
Good evening. Not gonna spend a lot of time on this because I will get super emotional. Today we spent the day working through the resignations in my department. As you can tell, I'm very sad to see both of them go. We wish them the best in their next adventures. And Shelly's out there watching right now, and she's going to make fun of me tomorrow. But we're very happy for them and what's coming, but it is sad for our department. All right. Okay. Real quick overview on financials, since I'm a hot mess. We were very fortunate to come in with revenues being about $2 million over our expenditures for the month, or for the month of December. You'll notice our medical benefits is up. That's just kind of our normal year procedures in December that's when our rate changes. And we did have an increase to insurance, and that hits majorly to the employer share that we pick up for our employees. So you'll see that larger increase to medical insurance benefits, and that's what that has to do with. And I do want to note on, I believe it's slide 6 that shows the net cash flow. It says $8 million. That was a typo. It should only be $2 million.
I like the 8, actually.
I like the 8 too, but unfortunately, that's not what it was.
Change that to an 8.
Yeah, I mean, if you like that number better, go for it. Have fun.
And while you're at it,
I mean,
Auditor might have something to say
I
about
was gonna say there might be some. I mean, it's slides. I don't care about that as long as my reports are good. And again, our investment income is performing amazingly well. I had a conversation with the firm that, not the firm, but the bank that handles a lot of that, and he said we're doing really good. Gave me some tips on what we might do just to utilize a little bit more of that interest revenue that is out there. But we're very happy with being able to reap some of that interest income that's available right now.
And it's amazing. A couple of years ago, we didn't have 2 dimes to rub together. It's just really nice to be in a position where good news actually helps even better news, right? You can just continue to do well.
So that's really all I have for you guys tonight, just to get those. And you'll notice that is November and December's financial report. If you'll remember, November, we really discussed it, the 5-year forecast in November. So we just figured we could just kind of smush them together for those 2 months.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve item 11, please? Motion by Mrs. Bloom. I have a second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Nally. Any discussion?
I think this is one of those points in the meeting where it would be nice to have the Chromebook because we get all this information before and we read through it. But just as a point, when Megan is taking the time to go through to be able to, scroll through and see that at the same time. So just so the public knows as well, like that's one of those things that it would be helpful.
I will see if I can amplify that process.
I mean, you can pull your phone up, but it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, those documents are a little too old for for that. I need a bigger screen.
You turn to the side and blow it up. That's what I do.
And Megan does such a nice job providing us documents that have all the information in there for every type of reader and learner. So yeah, it'd be nice to
have it live.
Not that it has to be expedited by any means, but that's just one of those. Yeah.
Yep.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Bloom? Yes. Mr. Nally?
Yes.
Ms. Lehman?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes, motion's approved. All right, moving on to board member communications and information. Don.
The only thing I was going to mention was this last Monday there was the MLK breakfast sponsored by the NAACP, and Joshua Motz, principal over at Otis, did a great job of emceeing that. Mrs. Hurt and Mr. Detweiler were also there. And Mr. Detweiler came in late, so Mrs. Hurt had the opportunity to say a few words, but that worked out fine. But just wanted to mention there was some great performance, music. Samara DeMoss played the bass and played a couple songs, and it was amazing. And I think that might be a person that we could see if next month being Black History Month, maybe she could come to one of the meetings and just do one song, just based on their longer songs. But it was great. And then there was really good participation with the schools, the elementary schools this year, putting together the speeches. And I don't know if those on our website somewhere.
I doubt it, Don. Now that you mention it, I bet they're not.
That might be a good idea to share it that way. I have a real long list, and I think it'd be more appropriate to put it on the website and give some special recognition to those students that participated and also received recognition.
Absolutely.
That's all I have tonight.
Sarah?
She's already scooted out of here, but I just wanted to thank Miss Terry for coming up here and sharing the information. I think we all got a few things from it, and what I hope the community kind of heard and saw was that a lot of things that she suggested that school boards do, we're actually already doing. So that's kind of, as a newer board member, to hear somebody from the OSBA level talk about how to effectively run school board meetings, even the little things that you don't think about, like how we sit. And that was one of the first things that she mentioned. So it's really nice to hear that some of those things that we're already doing, and we certainly appreciate her time coming up here. Thank you to the community for the donations. Always, again, we say this often, but we have a school district that cares about its students. So our community, rather, that cares about the students in the district. Congratulations to all the graduates. That's kind of neat to be January and be like, I'm out of here. So congratulations to all those students that successfully completed their graduation requirements early. We hosted a girls wrestling tournament over the past weekend.
36 teams.
36 teams, and I think our high school girls placed second. And our middle school girls placed third.
I didn't hear the middle school score.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. So shout out to the girls wrestling program, Coach Jen Long, and everybody who has a hand in that growing program. I know in talking with Chad Long today, he said that there are lots of compliments about facilities and just the tournament and just girls wrestling as a whole, and how it's growing across the state and how this tournament was well run. So just shout out to everybody in the wrestling program. I know I'm gonna go after Mrs. Hurt's heart with this next one. We are going into testing season. So our kiddos are going to be doing all the necessary and mandatory testing. That, some of those things that somebody else tells us that we have to do, so we do them. But it's imperative that, I know the schools do a lot of communication with the parents ahead of testing, so that kids are getting enough sleep, make sure that they're having, breakfast and just being prepared the best that they can for those state testing and other testing things that happen. So just be aware that those things are on the horizon. That's all.
Laura?
Yeah, I just want to say that I appreciate this. Was it last week? The health and wellness. We had a committee.
Yeah.
And I went there and everybody made me feel so welcome and it really felt so good. It did. When you're a new person and you really don't know much about what's going on, I'm not a person that really you like me, you don't. I'm proud enough of myself, know who I am, that it doesn't bother me. But it made me feel so good when I was in there, Megan, and I think a couple of the other people, I knew at the table, but everybody made me feel so welcome, and it just really meant a lot to me. And so it was that, and then on the other side of it, they're going through the health insurance and stuff like that, and Fremont really does have it together. I mean, they really do. I'm learning so much as I go, and I've only been at this for a couple of weeks, but I do a lot of research on the side, and I'm really very pleased with our school district, and I'm just getting into it. So I don't know. I just thought that was important to share. And I think those vending machines at the high school with the Fremont or the Roscoe on the side, I think they're really neat, and I can't wait to see them in person. Those are something I wish I would have had when we were in high school. That's neat.
Yeah.
Who made those?
Well, it's actually an outside vending company that was able to customize the look.
Okay.
Portion of that's proceeds going back to the athletic department because they're also open. They're on all the time. So we didn't want our concession folks to lose revenue because they were on. So made a little agreement that some of that proceeds would go back to the athletic department. And all the things in there meet the dietary requirements of school lunches, which you have to do. So it's kind of a neat program. We had tried some others. They weren't so successful. So far, so good with these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And kids love it. Kids love a choice. They also, they're done eating and they just one more thing, maybe something for later for practice or whatever. Just nice to have something there for kids to get off hours.
Yeah.
Sure.
I just think that I'm sure, like I said, I have to see them in person, but looking sharp inside of a brand new school with the logo on it, it looks really nice. I had to say that too. All right. That's it for me.
Lori?
Okay. Well, I just want to thank Terry for taking the time and it was a really good presentation. It was very informing and we do a lot of what she suggested and it's something that we started. I mean, when I got on the board, that's what we've done.
Yeah.
And the early grads, congratulations to them. I was one of those kids that did that. I graduated in January and my mom came up and said, get a job. The day after I graduated, she said, get up. But it's nice to be able to get out if you can and move on. I had a little girl at the time, so that was my reason for graduating early. And the resignations and the new hires, it's starting to see them go and nice to see the new ones come in. And thank you so much for all the donations and the time and the stuff that people do for the kids. And Mr. Malo's investment club. I've heard about that a few times and that's pretty neat. I mean, it's nice for the kids because we had to have a check writing class at my house because somebody completely signed their name the wrong way on a check. So we had to do that and trying to teach a 21-year-old to write cursive. So, but that's all I have. So.
Thanks to the community for the donations. I happened to stop by the district office real quick when some of those hats and scarves were delivered. There were a lot of bags of hats and scarves that were already divvied up and ready to go to all the different buildings. So thank you for that. I'm sure there are kids out there that were warmer because they got a hat and a scarf. So that's pretty amazing for our community to do that. Congratulations to the girls wrestling team, to Coach Long, to everything that they're doing with that program. Second year tournament to have over a couple hundred wrestlers here. And what'd you say, 36 teams? That's crazy.
That was varsity. I mean, that was high school. Yeah.
Right. So
I'm not sure
just crazy how that sport is growing. I'm amazed at it. I love it. Those girls can wrestle. They can just flat out wrestle. That's all there is to it. It is fun to watch. And with that, I think that's about it. We are going to go into an executive session under item B as in boy. There won't be any business conducted afterwards. We're going to adjourn immediately after executive session. So with that, I'll make the motion to move into executive session under item B. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Bloom. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Price,
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom,
Yes.
Ms. Lehman,
Yes.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Nally.
Yes.
Motion's approved. We are moving into executive session now.